All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Seattle Seahawks. Now, look, this is a team coming off a bye week, which might I add, they desperately needed it, specifically with both of their tackles that are back in practice. This is a team that's won 3 straight football games. But one thing I've really noticed, and keep in mind, man, Seattle is they were projected, they were supposed to win like what, 4, 5, at most 6 games this past season. They end up winning 9. They go above 500. They end up making the playoffs. But one thing I've really noticed with the Seattle Seahawks this season is there's always an if and or but when, like national media or somebody is talking about the Seattle Seahawks team. Like, oh, Seattle, their last win, it was impressive, but they're playing the New York Giants. They rattled off a bunch of points against the Carolina Panthers, but it's the Carolina Panthers. They took down the Detroit Lions in overtime in a phenomenal victory, but it was just week 2. And then obviously they lost to the Los Angeles Rams in week 1, so that's a huge nitpick for them. We've learned very quickly that, hey, you know what, the Rams are actually a lot better than we projected. And also, we're kind of realizing, since the preseason has been condensed to 3 games and the regular season has added an extra game, we're kind of starting to realize that, the first week of the regular season is kind of like an extended preseason 4th game, right? Now, it doesn't matter. I like being underappreciated. I like having a chip on my shoulder, and I think that's the perfect way to describe the Seattle Seahawks. Now, before we get any further into tonight's video, if you guys enjoy it, be sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content. Seahawks fans, I love you guys. You always show so much love on these videos. If you try and get this video to 250 likes, that would mean the absolute world to me. But one thing that's really been different for me with the Seahawks team is the defense. And we talked about it all off season, big time splashes in free agency like Tremont Jones. You pick up guys, you bring back guys like Bobby Wagner, Jaron Reed. You get guys like Devon Witherspoon in the draft. Devon Witherspoon, by the way, 2 sacks, 4 forced incompletions, a 97-yard pick 6. We talked about it all off season. This guy literally loves to hit. He seeks out contact, and that is just something you don't see in today's day and age in the National Football League. Like, these guys, respectfully, they want to get paid. They don't want to put their bodies on the line, especially. And I guess young players are a little bit different, but that's just something I've noticed with Devon Witherspoon, and all of these Seahawks players is, they just want it. Bobby Wagner coming on back to the Seattle Seahawks. He actually has the highest graded run defender in the National Football League this season with a grade of 93.2%. And that's one thing that's indicative that is very different from Seattle last season. They are number 1 in the National Football League, averaging or giving up just 3.2 yards per carry. So this defense, while they are currently ranked 19th in the National Football League, it just doesn't really matter to me. They've only played 4 games. That bye week came literally at the most perfect time. You're hitting on so many of these draft picks. You're hitting on so many of these free agent acquisitions. The offensive line has been completely depleted. You're missing Lucas. You're missing Cross. I believe the stat was, by the end of that Giants game, the last time the Seahawks played, they had 4 backup offensive linemen. Evan Brown, one of these guys, he's coming on over from the Detroit Lions, just kind of needed a new change of scenery. 37 snaps, only 4 pressures allowed, 0 quarterback hits allowed, 0 sacks allowed. The Seattle Seahawks in general, they've only given up 7 sacks so far this season. That's good for 4th in the National Football League. Now, it is important to note, like, for example, I'm watching the Chiefs-Broncos game wrap up their 6th game, and the Seahawks have only played 4. So we're going to take stats when compared to the rest of the league in, just with a grain of salt. A lot of their young players, we just talked about Devon Witherspoon, Zach Charbonnet, 75.8 PFF grade this season. That's 10th among all running backs in the league. That's 15th among all rookies. They took him in the 2nd round. They picked up JSN in the 1st round. This is a team. One of the things I love about this Seattle Seahawks team is they're not contingent and they're not reliant on Geno Smith's success. And when we take a look at Geno Smith, comeback player of the year, he had 30 touchdowns last season, just 11 interceptions. For example, like the first game against the Rams, kind of a bit of a wash. That last game against the Giants, so many people were nitpicking their offense, when in reality, they didn't really need to do much. The Giants had the ball so much in that entire game. They dominated the time of possession, but that wasn't indicative of how that game resulted. Now, I will say, for example, the Seahawks have converted only 28.9% of their 3rd down tries on offense. And even with their solid defense, they're still allowing opponents to convert more than 52.4% of their chances. Both of those two stats I just mentioned rank second to last in the National Football League. So yes, it's not perfect, but keep in mind for Seattle, they're only a month into their season. And we have to reiterate this point. This was a team that was projected 4, 5, at most 6 wins this past season. Whenever I see somebody talking about this Seahawks squad, it's just all of like, I don't really know what they are. I don't really fully believe in Geno Smith. And it's just important to hammer home the point. This is still an extremely young team. They filled it out with veterans, bringing back Bobby Wagner, bringing back Jaron Reed. You bring in guys like Devon Witherspoon. The future is extremely bright. The defense, I'm just so ecstatic about. There are some things, particular JSN, but I think with JSN, I do want to see him go off, but I think it is extremely important to note that due to the Seattle Seahawks' injured offensive line, they're running a lot of 2 tight end sets. You're, like I said, for that Giants game as an example, you're missing 4 of your 5 starting offensive linemen. You need to protect Geno Smith. You need to keep him healthy, but you need to keep him upright on a game-to-game basis. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to throw 2 tight ends out there. One of them is going to serve as an offensive tackle or just pass blocking, run blocking, whatever the case is. So, for example, we're looking at DK, we're looking at Tyler Lockett. They're playing like over 80% of offensive snaps. JSN, in comparison, we've only seen him play around 50% of your offensive snaps. So he was selected in the first round. The hype, the potential is high. We didn't see him, he got injured in his final year at Ohio State. This is something that I just kind of have in my back pocket. I also view Zach Charbonnet as just one of these players I have in my back pocket. But even Seattle, just on paper, I've got Geno Smith throwing 68.3% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. Now he's throwing only 211 yards per game, but that Rams game, we're kind of viewing that as a wash. And then we look back at that Giants game where offense just was not really important. It wasn't a factor for the Seattle Seahawks. Those 2 games in between it, Carolina and Detroit, we're looking at 300 yards. We're looking at classic vintage last year, Geno Smith. We've got DK. I'm not worried. If anybody's wondering, I'm personally not worried about DK, especially with a team like Seattle. Even if they lose this upcoming weekend against Cincinnati, they're still record-wise like a top 4 team, top 5 team in the NFC. So it's not perfect. It wasn't supposed to be perfect. So many people, in national football media, they're viewing Seattle as like, all right, well, obviously they're not as good as maybe, the San Francisco 49ers, the Philadelphia Eagles, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think it needs to be reiterated that this team is way above schedule, and people were calling for, not necessarily Seahawks fans, but people were calling for this team to completely rebuild last year. So the future's bright, and they're coming off 3 straight victories. Once again, if they take down Cincinnati, the narrative is just simply going to be, oh, Joe Burrow's injured, T. Higgins is injured. This isn't the Bengals that we've seen in the last 2 seasons. By the end of the year, none of this stuff will matter, and nobody will be looking back at these games and nitpicking them. So that's it for tonight, man. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content. If you want more Seahawks videos, let me know down below, but we're still posting at least 1 or 2 Seahawks videos depending on the week, every day or every week on this channel. So thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great rest of your night. Let me know what you're thinking about Seattle heading into this Cincinnati opponent.